The final battle for the galaxy began 3 months after humanity's return. Admiral Park Ji-won had spent those months teaching the Council races how to fight, how to abandon their rigid formations and embrace the chaos that humans had mastered through necessity. And slowly the tide had begun to turn, but the Devourers were relentless, and their swarm had grown to thousands of vessels. A dark tide rolling across the stars and consuming everything in its path. Intelligence reports indicated that the swarm was controlled by a central node, a massive structure hidden deep within Devourer territory. And as long as that node survived, the swarm would continue to multiply. We have to destroy it, Park told the assembled commanders in the war room on Varantos. Cut off the head and the body will die, Counselor Vethros, his crystalline form still bearing the scars of battle, studied the tactical display. The node is protected by their entire remaining fleet, he observed. Even with our combined forces, we do not have the numbers to break through. Then we do not break through, Park replied. We slip through. She outlined her plan. A massive diversionary assault that would draw the Devour fleet away from the node, while a small strike team penetrated their defenses and destroyed the command structure from within. It was a suicide mission, and everyone in the room knew it. I will lead the strike team, Park announced. The chamber erupted in protest, but Park silenced them with a raised hand. I am not asking for volunteers, she said. I am telling you what I am going to do. This is my responsibility. My people were cast out of this galaxy, and my people came back to save it. I will see this through to the end. Tayson stepped forward. Then I am coming with you, she declared. Park looked at the young scientist, saw the human determination in her eyes, and nodded. Anyone else? To her surprise, Vethros moved to stand beside them. I voted for your exile, he said quietly. I called your people savages and contamination. I was wrong. And I have spent these past months watching humans die for species that never showed them kindness. I cannot change what I did, but I can stand with you now. One by one. Others joined them, council officers and human marines, Metherni pilots and Valorian engineers. Beings from a dozen different species, united by a single purpose. Elder Morwen, too old and frail to fight, pressed her hand against Park's. You are everything I believed humanity could be, she said. Whatever happens today, know that. The strike team departed at dawn. The diversionary fleet engaged at the Devourer swarm in what would become the largest battle in galactic history. Thousands of ships clashing across light years of space. And the fury of their combat drew the enemy's attention exactly as Park had planned. Her small ship slipped through the chaos, dodging debris and weapons fire, navigating by instinct and luck toward the distant glow of the Devourer node. They lost 3 vessels in the approach, crews sacrificing themselves to clear a path for those who remained. And Park felt each death like a wound in her own body. That they did not stop. The node was enormous, a twisted fusion of organic and mechanical matter that pulsed with the dark energy that powered the entire swarm. And as they approached, Park could feel something reaching out toward her mind. Ancient and hungry and utterly alien drones incoming, her pilot warned. And the strike team engaged in a desperate firefight among the structures of the node itself. Tayson worked frantically at her console, searching for the weak point that would bring the entire structure down. There, she shouted, pointing to a concentration of energy at the node's core. If we can overload that reactor, it will create a cascade failure. How do we reach it? Park demanded. Tayson looked at her with eyes that held no fear. Only acceptance. Someone has to fly a ship directly into the core and detonate their reactor. The explosion will trigger the cascade. Park understood immediately. I will do it. No, Vethros said. And before anyone could stop him, he was moving toward the shuttle bay. You are needed, Admiral. Your people need their leader. The galaxy needs someone to show them what comes next. He turned to face her. And for the first time, Park saw beauty in his crystalline form. The light of distant stars reflecting through his body like a prism. "Let me do this one good thing," he said. "Let me prove that even those who have done wrong can choose differently in the end." Park wanted to argue, wanted to find another way, but there was no time and no alternatives. "Counselor," she said, and her voice cracked despite herself. "Thank you." Bethros boarded a shuttle and launched toward the core, and the strike team fought to keep the drones away from him, buying precious seconds with their lives. Park watched on her view screen as his shuttle disappeared into the heart of the node, and she heard his final transmission. "Tell the galaxy that the Kellis stood with humanity at the end," he said. "Tell them that we finally learned what you tried to teach us." The node exploded. The cascade failure rippled outward like a wave, and across the galaxy, Devourer ships went dark. Their connection to the Central Intelligence severed, their systems shutting down one by one. The swarm was dead. The survivors of the strike team limped back to Varanthos as heroes, and the celebration that followed lasted for days. Species that had been enemies embracing in the streets, old grievances forgotten in the joy of survival. But eventually, the celebration ended, and the work of rebuilding began in the Great Chamber where humanity had once been exiled. A new council assembled, and this time, there was a seat for the human representative. Admiral Park Ji-won stood before the assembled leaders of the galaxy, and Elder Mon asked the question that everyone was thinking: what does humanity want in return for what you have done? Park looked around the chamber at beings who had feared her people, who had cast them out, who had watched them return and fight and die for a galaxy that had rejected them. "A seat at the table," she said simply. "Not above you, beside you. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We want to belong to it. We want to be part of something greater than ourselves. Partners in building a future that is better than the past." Morwen smiled, her 4 eyes bright with tears. "Then let it be so." The vote was unanimous. Months later, Tayson stood on an observation deck on Varanthos, watching ships from 100 different species pass by. And she thought about everything that had changed. The galaxy was scarred but healing. And everywhere she looked, she saw humans working alongside aliens, teaching and learning, building and creating. A child ran past her, a Methrony girl with a human boy chasing after her, both of them laughing without any awareness of the history between their species. Tayson smiled. This was what her grandmother had dreamed of, what Ambassador Seojin had hoped for when he warned the council of their mistake. Not conquest, not revenge, but connection. She touched the window and looked out at the stars. "This is what we were always meant to be," she whispered to no one in particular. "Not conquerors, not victims, but family, somewhere out in the darkness, in the space between galaxies." The last echoes of the Devourer swarm faded into silence, and the galaxy, finally united, looked toward a future that no one had thought possible, a future that humanity had made real, not through power or vengeance, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to abandon hope. The council had sought a galaxy without humanity. Now they could not imagine one without them. The human fleet crossed the boundary veil in tight formation, 300 warships cutting through the darkness like a blade through silk. Admiral Park Ji-won stood on the bridge of her flagship, the unyielding spirit, watching the stars of council space appear on her view screen for the first time in her life. And she felt the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders. Her great-grandfather had been the last human to leave this galaxy, and now she would be the first to return. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "we are detecting massive energy signatures ahead. Devourer vessels. At least 40 of them surrounding Varanthos." Park nodded grimly. "Status of council forces?" "Scattered and disorganized. Most of their remaining fleet has pulled back to protect the station, but they will not last much longer." Beside her stood Tayson, the young scientist who had predicted this invasion and been dismissed as a hysteric. She had volunteered to serve as liaison between the human fleet and what remained of the Council forces. And her mixed heritage made her uniquely suited for the role. "The Council is hailing us," the communications officer announced. Park straightened her uniform and faced the view screen. "Put them through." Counselor Vethros appeared before her, and Park was surprised to see how diminished he looked. His crystalline form flickered weakly, and there were cracks running through his surface that spoke of damage and exhaustion. "You came," Vethros said, and his voice held none of its former arrogance. "We came," Park confirmed. "I did not believe you would, after what we did to your people. I did not believe you would risk yourselves for us." Park let the silence stretch for a moment before responding, "Counselor, my ancestors warned you that the galaxy would need us someday. They warned you that your stability would become your weakness. You chose not to listen." Vethros lowered his head. "I know." "Good," Park said. "Then you will understand that I am not here for you. I am here for the billions of innocent lives on those worlds behind you. I am here for the children who never voted for our exile, for the species who have no voice in your council, for everyone who deserves a chance to survive." She leaned forward. "I'm going to save your galaxy, Counselor, and when this is over, we are going to have a very long conversation about the future. But right now, I need you to do something you have never done before." "What is that?" "Follow my orders," Park replied, "without question, without debate, without your precious protocols and procedures. Can you do that?" Vethros hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I can." "Then tell your ships to form up behind mine and do exactly what we tell them. The Devourers are not like any enemy you have faced. They adapt to conventional tactics. They learn from every engagement. The only way to beat them is to be more unpredictable than they are." She smiled coldly, and no one is more unpredictable than humans. The combined fleet moved toward Varantos in a formation that made the Council tacticians nervous, because it violated every principle of proper warfare they had ever learned. Human ships did not fly in orderly lines. They darted and weaved and changed position constantly, making it impossible to predict where any given vessel would be from one moment to the next. "This is chaos," one council captain complained over the tactical channel. "This is survival," a human pilot replied. "You want order? Go join the Devourers. They love order." The Devourer swarm detected their approach and began to move. Dozens of massive vessels turning to face the incoming fleet, their weapons charging with that terrible dark energy that had destroyed so many council ships. "All ships, engage," Park ordered. The battle began. Human vessels struck first, launching volleys of weapons that seemed almost random in their targeting. Missiles and energy beams hitting Devourer ships from multiple angles simultaneously. The Devourers responded with their own fire, but their targeting systems struggled to track enemies that refused to fly straight. That doubled back and spiraled and attacked from unexpected directions. "Swarm tactics," Park explained to Tayson as they watched the engagement unfold. "The Devourers are machines. They think in patterns. They predict enemy behavior based on previous encounters. So we never behave the same way twice." A squadron of human fighters dove directly toward a Devourer vessel, and the massive ship oriented its weapons to destroy them. But at the last moment, the fighters split apart, revealing the missile they had been shielding. A weapon that slammed into the Devourer's exposed underbelly and detonated with enough force to crack the vessel in half. "We have been fighting these things for decades," Park continued. "They followed us through the Veil 30 years ago. We lost many worlds before we learned how to hurt them. But we learned." The council ships began to follow the human example, their captains abandoning the formations they had been taught and embracing the controlled chaos of human warfare. For the first time, the Devourers began to fall, but there were so many of them, and more kept arriving, drawn by the energy signatures of battle, hungry for the matter and life that both fleets represented Admiral. We are receiving a distress signal from the station, the communications officer reported. A Devour boarding party has breached the outer sections. Park made her decision instantly. Tassin, you know this station better than any of us. Take a Marine squad and assist with the defense. I will handle things out here. Tayson nodded and ran for the shuttle bay. Minutes later, she was aboard Varanthos, leading a squad of human Marines through corridors filled with smoke and screaming. And she saw firsthand what the Devourers did to the living. They did not simply kill. They consumed, absorbing organic matter into their mechanical bodies. And the victims were aware until the very end. The Council defenders had been overwhelmed. Their security forces trained for ceremonial duties rather than actual combat. But the human Marines moved with deadly efficiency, covering fire, their sergeant ordered. And plasma bolts tore through a cluster of Devour drones. Tayson found herself fighting alongside beings she had never met. Methrony soldiers and Valorian guards, and even a group of Kalith, who had shattered their crystalline fists against the invaders. Why are you helping us? A wounded Caliph asked her as she dragged him to safety. Because someone has to. Tayson replied the fighting was brutal and close. Room by room and corridor by corridor. But slowly they pushed the Devourers back, and then Tayson saw something that stopped her heart. Counselor Vethros, the being who had spoken with such contempt about her human heritage, was standing alone against a Devourer construct twice his size. His crystalline body cracked and bleeding light, but refusing to retreat. "Get away from here!" he shouted at a group of civilians cowering behind him. "I will hold them." Tayson did not hesitate. She raised her weapon and fired, striking the Devourer in what passed for its head. And the construct staggered long enough for Vethros to shatter its core with a desperate blow. The counselor turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something she had never expected to see: gratitude. "You saved my life," he said. "I saved a life," Tayson corrected. "That is what humans do." Vethros looked at her for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time the human blood that ran in her veins, the heritage that he had dismissed as contamination. "I was wrong," he whispered. "About so many things." Before Tayson could respond, a communicator crackled. "The Devourers are pulling back," Admiral Park announced. "We have won the first battle, but this war is far from over. All forces consolidate at Varanthos. We have planning to do." Tayson helped Vethros to his feet, and together they walked toward the great chamber where the Council had once condemned humanity. The galaxy had changed today, and it would never be the same again. The boundary veil was not a physical barrier, but a region of space so empty, so devoid of stars and resources, that no species had ever found reason to cross it. Until now, Elder Morwen guided her small vessel through the darkness, following ancient star charts that showed nothing but void ahead. And she wondered if this journey was merely a different kind of death. Perhaps the humans had perished out here in the cold, between galaxies. Perhaps their bones drifted somewhere in this endless night. Another species that had burned too bright and faded too fast, but then her sensors detected something unexpected: a beacon, broadcasting on frequencies that no Council species used, repeating a message in a language Morwen had not heard in 150 years. "This is the border of human space," the message declared. "Identify yourself or turn back." Morwen felt her hearts begin to race as she transmitted her response. "I am Elder Counselor Morwen of the Etheri," she said. "I come seeking humanity's help. The galaxy is dying." There was a long pause, and then the beacon fell silent. Morwen waited in the darkness, wondering if she would be destroyed or ignored or simply left to drift forever. Then the stars came alive. Ships emerged from hiding places she had not detected. Vessels unlike anything the Council had ever built. Sleek and angular and bristling with weapons that hummed with barely contained power. And they surrounded her in a formation that spoke of military precision. "Follow us," a voice commanded. And Morwen obeyed. They led her deeper into human space, past defensive stations and patrol fleets and asteroid bases that had been hollowed out and converted into fortresses. And Morwen realized with growing amazement that humanity had not merely survived. They had built an empire, the Heart Space Confederacy. They called it a nation forged in exile and tempered by hardship, spanning hundreds of worlds in a region of space the Council had believed empty. Morwen's escort brought her to a massive station orbiting a blue-white star. And there she was met by armed guards who searched her vessel before allowing her to proceed. They led her through corridors filled with people who stopped to stare at the alien in their midst. Children who had never seen a non-human. Adults who remembered the stories their parents had told about the species that cast them out. Finally, she was brought before the Confederacy's ruling council, a circle of 12 representatives chosen from the human worlds. And at their head sat a woman whose face seemed hauntingly familiar. "I am Admiral Park Ji-won," the woman said, her voice hard as steel. "My great-grandfather was Yoon Seo-jin, the last human ambassador to the Galactic Council. I know who you are, Elder Morwen, and I know why you have come." Morwen bowed her head in respect. "Then you know that I would not be here unless the need was desperate." She replied, "Tell me." And so Morwen told them everything. The Devourers and their endless hunger, the Council fleets falling one by one, the worlds being consumed, and the terrible truth that without help the galaxy would be empty within a generation. When she finished, the chamber was silent. Then one of the council members, an old man with scars on his face and rage in his eyes, slammed his fist against the table. "They exiled us," he snarled. "They called us savages and cast us into the void to die, and now they want us to save them?" "Yes," Morwen said simply. "Why should we?" Another voice demanded, "Why should we sacrifice our children for species that wished us exterminated?" "You should not," Morwen admitted. "You owe us nothing. We treated you with contempt and cruelty, and you would be justified in watching us burn." She paused, letting her words settle. "But I am asking anyway," she continued. "Not because you owe us, but because of who you are. In 200 years among the council races, I observed one thing about humanity that no other species seemed to possess. You help those who cannot help themselves, even when they do not deserve it, even when they have done nothing to earn it. You extend your hand to the fallen and lift them up." Admiral Park Ji-won listened without expression. "You are asking us to die for the very people who rejected us," she said. "I am asking you to be who you have always been." Morwen replied. The council debated for hours, while Morwen waited in an adjacent chamber. She could hear raised voices through the walls, arguments and counter-arguments, old grievances and new fears. Finally, the doors opened and Admiral Park emerged. Her face was unreadable as she approached the ethereal elder. "Come with me," she said. Park led Morwen through the station to a memorial hall, a vast space lined with walls of names, millions of names carved into black stone. "These are the humans who died in the Exodus," Park explained. "Ships that failed in the crossing, colonies that could not survive the first years. People who gave everything so that humanity could endure." She stopped before a section of wall and traced her fingers over a cluster of names. "My family is here," she said quietly. "My grandmother, my uncles, my cousins, they died so that I could live. So that my children could live." Morwen said nothing. Understanding that this moment required silence, Park turned to face her. "I hate your council," she admitted. "I hate what they did to my people, and part of me wants to let them suffer, wants to watch them experience the fear and desperation they inflicted on us." Her jaw tightened. "But that is not who we are. It is not who my great-grandfather was when he warned the council of their mistake. It is not who my grandmother was when she died, making sure others could reach safety." She took a deep breath. the Confederacy will fight. Morwen felt tears forming in her eyes, a display of emotion rare for her species. "Thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet," Park replied. "This will not be easy. The Devourers are unlike anything we have faced, and many of my people will die for species who would have let us perish." She straightened her shoulders and became once again the admiral, the leader, the commander of humanity's fleets. "But we will show the galaxy what humanity chose to become," she declared. "Not conquerors seeking revenge, not victims begging for acceptance, but something else entirely. Something the Council never understood." "What is that?" Morwen asked. Park smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "Only determination, family," she said. "We protect our family, even when they do not deserve it, even when they have forgotten what family means." She activated her communicator and spoke in a voice that carried across the station. "All ships. This is Admiral Park. Prepare for deployment. We are going home, across the hard space Confederacy." Engines roared to life, and weapon systems powered up. And humanity prepared to return to a galaxy that had tried to forget them. Morwen watched in amazement as the fleet assembled. Hundreds of warships built for survival, crewed by people who had learned to fight not for glory, but because fighting was the only way to live. As she realized that the Council had been right to fear humanity, they had simply been wrong about why. The distress signal had been repeating for 3 days before anyone responded. Quarks, a Methrony trader who had spent 40 years hauling cargo between the outer colonies, was the first to arrive at Vethelis Prime. And what she found there made her scales turn white with terror. The colony was gone, not abandoned, not evacuated, simply gone. And in its place was a field of glass and ash that stretched from horizon to horizon, as if some impossibly powerful force had reached down from the heavens and burned away everything that had once lived there. Quarks transmitted her findings to the nearest Council outpost and waited for instructions that never came, because by the time her message arrived, that outpost had also gone silent. 150 years had passed since humanity's expulsion, and the galaxy had enjoyed an era of unprecedented stability. Trade routes functioned without disruption. Conflicts between species were resolved through proper diplomatic channels, and the Council governed with the calm efficiency of a machine that had been running smoothly for millennia. But now something was wrong in the Great Chamber on Varantos. The Council convened an emergency session for the first time in decades, and the reports they reviewed painted a picture none of them could explain. 17 colony worlds had gone dark in the past year. Ships were vanishing along the rim of explored space, and entire species were disappearing from their homeworlds without a trace. Council of Vethrus listened to the reports with growing impatience, his crystalline form flickering with irritation. "These incidents are unrelated," he declared. "We are dealing with pirates, natural disasters, perhaps some localized conflict that has not been properly reported. There is no evidence of a coordinated threat." "With respect, Counselor," a young voice interrupted, and the chamber fell silent as a Valorian scientist stepped forward. Her name was Tayson, and there was something unusual about her features, something that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Because while she was officially listed as Valorian, anyone with eyes could see the human heritage in her face. Tayson's grandmother had been human, one of the few who had remained behind in hiding after the expulsion. And though her family had kept this secret for generations, Tayson had never been ashamed of her mixed blood. "I have analyzed the pattern of these disappearances," she said, pulling up a holographic display that showed the galaxy spinning slowly before them. "And they are not random. They form a spiral originating from a point beyond the galactic rim." From the intergalactic void, Vethros made his dismissive wind chime sound. "The void is empty," he stated. "Nothing exists out there. Nothing that we know of, Tayson corrected. And several council members gasped at her boldness. But the evidence suggests that something is coming from that direction. Something that is systematically moving inward and destroying everything in its path. And what exactly do you believe this something to be? Elder Morwen asked. Her 4 eyes focused intently on the young scientist. Tayson hesitated, knowing that her next words would either save the galaxy or end her career. I believe we are facing an extragalactic invasion, she said. A threat that none of our ancient protocols were designed to handle. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouting over each other, some demanding that Tayson be removed for spreading panic. Others insisting that more investigation was needed. Vethros raised his hand for silence, and when he spoke, his voice dripped with contempt. This council has maintained peace and order for 10,000 years, he reminded them. We have faced challenges before and overcome them through wisdom and measured response. I will not allow one half-breed scientist to frighten us into abandoning our principles. Tayson felt the sting of his words, felt the shame of having her heritage thrown in her face. But she did not back down. Then at least send scouts to investigate, she pleaded. Send ships to the rim and confirm what I am telling you. Vethros was about to refuse when Elder Morwen spoke up. The girl is right, Morwen said, and her age-weathered voice carried weight that even Vethros could not dismiss. We should at least verify her claims. What harm can it do to look? The council grudgingly agreed to send 3 scout vessels to the galactic rim. None of them returned. 2 months later, the first Devourer ship entered council space. It was enormous. A vessel the size of a small moon, covered in strange organic mechanical growths that pulsed with dark energy. And it did not respond to any hail or communication. The council sent a diplomatic fleet to make contact. 12 of their finest vessels crewed by their most experienced officers. And they approached the alien ship with all proper protocols observed. The Devourer ship did not negotiate. It simply opened fire. And in less than an hour, all 12 council vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Then, Devourer ship moved on to the nearest inhabited world and began to feed Quarks. Watching from the safety of a distant asteroid, saw what happened next and finally understood what they were facing. Because the Devourer ship did not simply destroy the planet below, it consumed it, drawing up matter and energy and life itself into its massive form. And as she watched in horror, she saw the ship begin to split, to divide, to become 2 vessels where there had been one before. The Devourers were not an army. They were a swarm. And they were growing. Quarks sent one final transmission before fleeing into the darkness. They eat everything. Her message read, they eat worlds, they eat ships, they eat people. And every time they eat, they multiply. You cannot fight them with weapons. You cannot reason with them. You can only run. But there was nowhere left to run in the great chamber on Varanthos. Councillor Vethros watched as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Colony after colony falling silent, fleet after fleet being destroyed. And for the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. What do we do? The Methrony representative asked, her serpentine body coiled tight with terror. Vethros had no answer. The council fleets, designed for ceremonial shows of force and occasional peacekeeping missions, were being swept aside like insects before a storm, their weapons ineffective, their tactics useless against an enemy that adapted to every attack. We need help, Elder Morwen said quietly. And every eye in the chamber turned to her. Help from whom? Vethros demanded. We are the greatest civilization in the galaxy. There is no one more powerful than us. Morwen looked at him with something like pity in her ancient eyes. There is someone, she said. Beyond the boundary veil, the chamber fell deathly silent. No, Vethros said, his crystalline form darkening with anger. Absolutely not. I will not grovel before those savages. Then we die, Morwen replied simply. Because without them, we have no hope. Tayson stepped forward again, her human heritage suddenly seeming less like a shame and more like a bridge. I volunteered across the veil, she said. I will find what remains of humanity and beg them to save us. Morwen shook her head. No. Child, she said gently, this burden is mine. I was the only one who voted against their expulsion. I am the only one who has the right to ask for their forgiveness. The old Etheri rose from her seat and walked toward the chamber doors. Prepare my ship, she ordered. I am going to find the humans, if any of them survived. Vethra said nothing as she left, but his reports continued to stream in. As more lights went dark on the galactic map, he began to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, the Council had made a terrible mistake 150 years ago, and he began to pray that humanity had survived. Because without them, the galaxy was doomed. Ambassador Yoon Seojin stood alone in the center of the great chamber, surrounded by beings who had already decided her species was unwelcome in their galaxy. The Galactic Council met on Varanthos, a station world built at the intersection of 12 ancient trade routes. And for 10,000 years, this chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the forging of treaties, and the judgment of species deemed unworthy of the stars. Today it would witness the expulsion of humanity. Seojin kept her expression calm as the Kaleth representative rose from his crystalline throne, his body catching the light and scattering it into rainbows across the vaulted ceiling. The vote has been called, Vethros announced, his voice ringing like struck glass, and the charges are clear. Humanity has violated the sacred principles of galactic civilization through their reckless innovation, their dangerous unpredictability, and their corruption of younger species with radical ideas. Seojin wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but she had learned long ago that the Council did not appreciate human humor. The charges against her people were simple. Humans refused to know their place in the 2 centuries since first contact. Humanity had committed unforgivable sins in the eyes of the elder races. They had befriended the Vashni, a species the Council considered little more than useful servants, and taught them that they deserved better treatment. They had questioned laws that had stood unchanged for millennia, asking why things had to be done a certain way simply because they had always been done that way. And worst of all, they had advanced too quickly, mastering technologies in decades that other species had taken thousands of years to develop. The Methrani vote for expulsion, the Serpentine ambassador hissed, and Seojin marked another tally in her mind. The Valorians vote for expulsion, came the next voice. Deep and resonant, one by one they announced their decisions, and one by one they condemned humanity to exile. Seojin remembered the day she had arrived on Varanthos as a young diplomat, full of hope and wonder at the vast civilization humanity had finally joined. She had believed that the galaxy would welcome her people, that together they could build something magnificent. She had been so naive. The truth was that the elder races did not want partners. They wanted obedient children who would follow the rules and never challenge the established order. And humanity had proven incapable of being obedient. The Etheri vote, Elder Counselor Morwen announced, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she paused, and Seojin felt a flicker of hope. Morwen had always been different from the others, always willing to listen. The Etheri vote against expulsion, Morwen said firmly. We believe this action will bring consequences none of us can foresee. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but Vethros silenced them with a wave of his crystalline hand. The vote stands at 11-1 in favor of expulsion, he declared. Humanity is hereby ordered to withdraw beyond the boundary veil within 1 galactic cycle. Any human vessel found in Council space after that time will be destroyed without warning. Seojin finally stepped forward, and the chamber fell silent. "You are making a mistake," she said, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. "Not because humanity is powerful or because we will seek revenge. We are not that kind of people. You are making a mistake because you have forgotten why civilizations survive." Vethros made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, the Kelith equivalent of dismissive laughter. And what wisdom could a species barely out of its infancy offer the elder races? Civilizations survive not because they are stable, but because they can adapt, Seojin replied. You have built a galaxy where nothing changes, where every problem is solved the same way it was solved 10,000 years ago. And you call this wisdom, but the universe does not stay the same. The universe is chaos and danger and constant challenge. And when something new threatens you, something your ancient protocols cannot handle, you will find that all your stability has made you brittle. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives, at beings who had lived for centuries and commanded fleets of thousands of ships. And she saw in their eyes nothing but contempt for the young species that dared to lecture them. You cast us out because you fear what we might become, Seojin said. But you should fear what you will become without us. You may find the galaxy lonelier than you expect. She turned and walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. The exodus began. 3 days later, Seojin stood on the observation deck of the colony ship, Perseverance, and watched as thousands of vessels formed up for the journey into the unknown. Freighters and passenger liners and science vessels and everything humanity had built during their time among the stars. All of it heading toward the Boundary Veil, a region of dead space at the edge of the galaxy where no council species had ventured in living memory. Her aide, a young man named Kim Do-yeon, approached with a tablet in his hands. Ambassador, we have confirmed that all human citizens have been evacuated from council worlds, he reported. There were some incidents, protests from alien friends who wanted to come with us, but we managed to keep things peaceful. Seojin nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of those words, alien friends. In 200 years, humanity had formed bonds across species lines, had built relationships that the council deemed inappropriate. And now all of that was being severed. Did the Vashni delegation send a message? She asked. Do-yeon looked down at his tablet, and she could see the pain in his young face. They said they will remember us, he replied quietly. They said that no matter what the council decrees, humans will always be their brothers and sisters. Seojin closed her eyes and let out a breath she had been holding since the vote. Then we have not failed entirely, she whispered. The fleet began to move, engines flaring to life across the darkness of space. And Seojin watched as Varantos grew smaller in the distance. The station world that had been the heart of galactic civilization, the place where humanity had been judged and found wanting. She did not know what awaited them beyond the Boundary Veil. Perhaps death, perhaps simply a slow decline into obscurity. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty: humanity would not go quietly. They would survive. They would adapt. They would build something new in the darkness. And someday, perhaps centuries from now, the galaxy would learn what happened when you cast out the one species that refused to give up. Behind her, the council celebrated their victory and declared a new era of peace and stability. They had no idea what they had done. In the great chamber on Varantos, Councilor Vethros addressed his fellow representatives with satisfaction gleaming in his crystalline form. The human contamination has been excised, he announced. The galaxy is finally clean. Elder Morwen said nothing, but her 4 eyes remained fixed on the stars beyond the chamber windows, on the distant region of space where thousands of human ships were disappearing into the unknown. She alone among the council felt the weight of what they had done, and she alone suspected that someday, somehow, the galaxy would regret this day. But her warning had been ignored. Her vote overruled, and now there was nothing left to do but wait and see what the future would bring. The boundary veil swallowed the last human ship, and the galaxy moved on without them for 150 years. That seemed like the end of the story.